Hello, my friends, and welcome back. Thank you very much for being with me again today. Well, isn't this some great news? Yes, I think it is. The Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, comes out and honestly and straight tells us that he is going to reveal the Israel's long-term plan in Gaza. So a politician like Netanyahu is going to tell us, reveals to us Israel's long-term plan in Gaza. Now get ready for euphemisms and balaga. Hey, I have this article ready for you coming from Russia Today. Today, November 10th, 2023. Netanyahu, this guy, reveals Israel's long-term plan for Gaza. Okay, well, let's take Netanyahu to his word, okay? The Prime Minister insists there is no intention to conquer or occupy the Palestinian enclave. Well, is he going to use euphemisms? He's like, no, we don't control Gaza. Well, you want to see how they control or don't control Gaza? They were able to turn off the water, electricity, food, who comes in, who comes out. There's like a cell, like a jail cell. And you say you don't control it? You don't occupy it. You just imprison someone. If you are capable of turning off the water, electricity, who comes in, who goes out, food, and so on, and you close the border of an enclave, who's in charge? So what are you talking about? So expect euphemisms here. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who actually is very much attacked by higher forces. He screwed up somewhere. I'm not sure exactly where, but he is not the darling of the big interests anymore, banking interests and his guys' interest, his people's interest. He did something. We're going to talk about that in another video. So Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has said his country does not intend to take control of Gaza. You already took control of Gaza. Who comes in, who comes out? You have electricity or you don't have electricity? You have water, you don't have water? How do you call that? Love and happiness? Imagine that you have a wife or a husband and you are capable of depriving your loved one, of water. Who's in charge? Who controls who? And you could also deprive the loved one of food, electricity, and you also can lock the doors whenever you want, and she or he cannot leave the house. How do you call that? Who controls? I don't intend to control it. How do you call that one? And by the way, that was not mutual or voluntary. Again, I told you have to get ready for euphemisms and baga. Does not intend. Well, that's a point. You don't intend, but then things change and you have to. In self-defense and to protect people, you have to. You're forced to. They force you. So that's your fault. But would seek to establish a quote-unquote credible force to ensure that the territory no longer presents a threat to the Jewish state. Credible force. Establish a credible force. Okay, let's move on. Keep that in mind. Speaking to Fox News on Thursday, Netanyahu outlined his government's plans, plural, for post-conflict Gaza, stressing that Israeli forces would not attempt to displace local residents in the ongoing ground assault. They just told them, leave, we're going to bomb you. And if you don't leave, that means you are supporting Hamas. That's what they said. And said there's no distinction between those guys and the Hamas if you don't leave. What does that mean? Imagine that China tells you, as a civilian, let's say not China, whatever enemy your country has, wherever you might be, think of the neighbor or the country that you hate or you don't like or that your enemy. Each and every country has such a situation because they always have borders, they always have problems. So think about that in your country. And imagine those guys tell you, you know what, we're going to attack you, but we're not going to kill civilians. But you, the civilian, you have to move out of the cities that we are going to bomb. And if you don't move, it's on you. So imagine, okay, let's move. Why? Because the enemy tells us that if we don't move, he's going to strike us and it's on us. You understand the logic here? And then I say, hey, if you don't move, that means those guys, your government, keeps you as a human shield. And we're supposed to say, yes, that's logical, yes, that's fair. Jesus Christ. All right, and I'm quoting Mr. Netanyahu. What we have to see is Gaza demilitarized. Sounds familiar? De-radicalized. Sounds familiar? Or denazified, remember? And rebuild. Have it a neutral. All of that can be achieved. Didn't the Russians say the same thing about Ukraine? When the Ukrainian government was killing Russian-speaking in the eastern Ukraine. Isn't that what the Russians said? Demilitarize, radicalize, denazify, and rebuild. Make it, neutral. West and us control it because we can't afford it to have it different way because these guys, the government from Kiev, were attacking with tanks the military. Those guys over there, the breakaway republics. Why breakaway? Because they did not agree with a coup, bloody coup organized by democracies toppling and overthrowing a democratically elected legitimate government of Viktor Yanukovych in spring 2014, the Maidan, blah, blah, blah. Sounds familiar? No, if you don't want to, it doesn't sound familiar. Like I tell you, this song, I say, where do I begin to tell the story of Bobby? But sounds familiar? Let me see what the interest is. I know the song, but I will say no because I know where he goes with that. No, it doesn't sound familiar. It's not the same thing. But it's the same thing. But no, it doesn't sound familiar. No, I don't remember it. Why? Because the next step is going to come and say, see, because of this, the same here. Sounds familiar? No, it doesn't sound familiar. Demilitarized, de-radicalized, and rebuilt. Doesn't sound familiar with the Russians. Don't lump them together. Why? Because you don't want to recognize it. Like the song, Love Story by, what's his name, Andy Williams. And I'm quoting Netanyahu. We don't seek to conquer Gaza, but we don't seek to occupy Gaza, and we don't seek to govern Gaza. Well, is Gaza going to be empty? I think that's going to be the only option that you have, the scenario, if you don't want to conquer Gaza, you don't want to occupy Gaza, and you don't want to govern Gaza. I think only if Gaza is empty, you could achieve these three goals. Because if there are Palestinians in Gaza, you have to conquer Gaza. You actually are conquering Gaza. We don't occupy Gaza, but we control it like a cell, like an inmate cell, like a prison cell. However, that's the but. The Prime Minister went on to state that Israel would need to establish a credible force, I got that could enter Gaza and kill the killers. So that means if you can enter Gaza and dispense justice, as you say, who controls who? But you don't want to control it. But if you can they do the same thing to you if you are the killers? Or only you can do that to them? Oh, only you can do that. Why? Oh, because you're good and they're bad. The same thing as in Ukraine. Good, bad, good and evil. This biblical polarity here, and not only yin and yang, blah, 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 trululu. It's true, but, sometimes things are in between. Why? Because if you look at yin and yang, they are a side, but part of this is a little bit inside of the other one. Part of this is inside of that. So plus and minus, sometimes they are intertwined. That's what they say. So it's not good and evil, even there. But hey, we talk about... Anyway, man. So he wants a credible force to come in and eliminate whomever they consider killers. At any time. Right here. At any time. See here. Credible force that could enter Gaza and kill the killers at any time, whenever they want. That means who's controlling whom? You can't enter somewhere if you don't control that door. Unless it's an aggression, isn't it? Can you enter a country or someone's house if you don't like what's going on over there? Or you have a problem? If you can, that means you either trespass, right, virgin, or the other one is you can because you have the keys. You control it. You have access to that. Arguing that's what will prevent the emergence of another Hamas-like entity. The interview with Fox came just of the days, blah, 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 boo, boo, boo. And he says Netanyahu declared that Israel would manage overall security in Gaza. I know, for the indefinite period. I know that it will manage overall security in Gaza for an indefinite period. You know what that is? We're gonna, they say, manage overall security. That means control, occupy. That's, he said, we don't intend to do that, but we have to. You push us. Manage overall security for indefinite time. How long it takes, and guess what? We determine how long it takes. Could be forever, but we don't occupy it. We don't intend. Jesus Christ, this is like children, man. They say here, right? At the beginning, had no intention to conquer or occupy, but they can enter and kill whomever they want. The credible force, which I'm guessing is going to be United States, Great Britain, Israel, maybe another weasel states. There's the credible. I don't think there's going to be any Russians over there. Something tells me North Korean or maybe Arab states, the ones that will cooperate. No Iranians, no, and so on. And then he says we're going to manage overall security in Gaza. Remember? So they don't intend to conquer or occupy. But, we have to, where's that at? Right here. Would manage. We don't intend to conquer, but we're going to manage. How do you manage it if you're not there? For indefinite period. That means whenever we feel like. All right. Defense Minister Yoav Gallant previously said Israel forces would establish a new security reality in the area because you're in control. If you're not in control, you can't establish anything. You can talk about it, but it's not going to be working, right? But emphasize that Israeli Defense Forces would not be responsible for day-to-day life in the Gaza Strip. Yeah, it's one thing they say, the other thing that they do. While Netanyahu clarified that a new civilian government would be created by Gazans. So how do you know it's going to be a civilian government if the Gazans will create it? Do you let them create something or you go and impose? If the Gazans want to have a military government, they create whatever they want. And then they are punished for that, correct? No, I tell you why. Because if that would be the case and say, hey, Palestinians and Gazans, you're responsible for Hamas actions from 7th of October. If you say that, then you have to say to the Americans, hey, Americans, you are guilty of dropping 2 atomic bombs in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Those are war crimes. They were civilian targets, 2 cities. Are you going to use collective punishment? Or punishment or guilt by association? You don't do that there. So if you don't do that there for obvious reasons, because after all, the Americans elected the government that decided to drop the atomic bombs. So the same thing, if the Gazans decided to have the Hamas who did something bad to Israel, obviously, right? But the history doesn't start on October 7th, but they started only then. All right? Then you can't blame the Palestinians. You can't blame the Palestinians for doing that, can you? Obviously you can. Then we can punish the Americans for many countries that they brought into democracy and freedom and all that by invading them. Man, it's undefendable, man. It's like undefendable. Now, what can I tell you? Israel first occupied Gaza during the 1967 Six-Day War with Egypt, Jordan, and Syria, and only withdrew its troops and settlers nearly 40 years later. However, the rise to power of Hamas in the enclave in 2007 prompted a tight blockade over the territory, and the IDF has launched multiple bombing campaigns in the years since. So, you got the plan? All right, the plan is we're going to control it. We're going to do whatever we want, whenever we want, and you are not supposed to call it the way it is. You call it the way we want you to call it, and the media will make sure that instills that in our brains, the right terms that we are allowed to use if you want to be allowed in the, how do you call that, decent society. In the civilized society, in a civil society, okay? And otherwise you're going to be an outcast because you can't use the words we don't allow you to use. Why? Because they express reality and we don't like that in this case. Thank you very much for being with me again today. Stay strong, stay smart, look for the truth, and be just.